Hello, I'm Steve Buchanan, MVP here at MMS 2016, and we're going to talk about Azure Stack. So what is Azure Stack?
Hey, Steve.
You guys.
So for me, Azure Stack is Azure. Ultimately, it is the same product, the same solution, the same destination, with one major difference. There's a new location. That location is your data center.
And my name is Mikael, and I'm also an MVP, and I'm also at MMS. And when I first played with Azure Stack or heard about it, I was like, oh, that is a replacement for Azure Pack. But then it wasn't, because it's exactly what you say. It is, I like Azure. I'm a DevOps. Our company is developing applications rapidly. We want to we want to use Azure. It's just, I want the other location. I want to run it on my own premises for any reason, which could be basically security, it could be money, it could be, I don't know, it could be anything. It's Azure, but on-prem. So it has really nothing to do with, all this other system center and management and anything like that.
So no system center required with Azure Stack?
Well, that depends. To make it work, to have it up and running, no, you don't need anything else than Azure Stack. But at the same time, it doesn't have everything. I mean, there's no backup solution inside. There's no really a monitoring solution inside. It's an engine. It's an Azure engine. If you pop it up and open it, it's a bunch of VMs running on Hyper-V. So at the same time, it's amazing. It's like, yeah, there's a domain controller. It has accounts. Okay, so that's...
So you made a comment that it's not Azure Pack. So what are the main differences between Azure Stack and Azure Pack?
There's a lot of differences between these two products.
Yeah, it is.
And they're both physical and also based on technical. Physically, Azure Pack is a front door to the System Center suite. It is front doors through a layer that converts HTTP requests, internet-friendly requests, into essentially PowerShell commands. So we call that the provider framework. And then behind that provider framework, we have the engines of System Center, primarily Virtual Machine Manager and Operations Manager. But there are other extensions that can go in there and do more things, but it is effectively that presentation layer. In Azure Stack, we're looking at nothing whatsoever to do with System Center. It is just a new provisioning set of engines and rules that are based on the exact same resource manager technology that's used today in Azure.
So resource manager. So in Azure Pack, we don't have ARM, but
Correct.
we have ARM in Azure Stack, right? So what is ARM? What is that? Can you explain what ARM is?
It's a lot of things. From a UI perspective, it is a far better way to build resources in Azure. Instead of having this long wizard you click through and builds everything, and you can't poke on each and every component, you really say, I need the following components. So it's from a DevOps perspective, or from coding perspective, it is like infrastructure as code, if you want to do that. It's like, I need the following components, and I combine that into a resource group, and that's going to be my solution, which I then can do whatever I like with.
So a resource group, what kind of break that down for anyone that's watching this? What does that mean? What is a resource group?
Well, that depends on how you define it. But basically, a resource group is a container. You can call it a container. And in that container, you can say, I want the following VMs, I want the following load balancers, I want the following items or resource in that, and I'm going to use it in this way. You can throw an entire resource group away, or you can turn it off, or you can build an entire resource group. So you can basically say, hey, this is a resource group. What does it do? Well, it's a remote desktop solution, or it is a web application, and then you can have virtual networks connected in between. So if you go back to the old Azure way, it's like, here's the gateway, and then you can connect stuff to it. Okay, so So if I want to divide the gateway in the old Azure, well, no, it's a blob. It's an item. So the difference, I think that the correct way, a programmatically way, is going to be ARM. It's smarter. It's more scalable. It's just the thing that they figure out after a while. It's like, hey, this is better.
And we have ARM in Azure, right? And now we have ARM in Azure Stack, right? And they're the same thing, right?
The consistency story. Yeah, absolutely. This is the consistency story, and it goes back to what Mikael just said. It is infrastructure as code. And the key piece here is that as we address the DevOps direction, we're taking everything that the IT guys would have essentially built previously, either through WAP or through physical routines, and essentially just make that definition, that ARM template, your recipe effectively, to say that I need a virtual machine with 2 network interfaces with these IP addresses hitting behind this load balancer. And effectively, with that one piece of code, that gets logged into your actual development project. And then as you evolve that project and add more functions and features, you may also decide that I need more compute resources or more network interfaces or more IP addresses. Then you just modify that code, which is your infrastructure, push that back out, and essentially your environment will just be incrementally increased, but it's fully tracked.
So DevOps, right? We keep hearing this word, and especially more and more with Azure Stack, right?
Yes.
And Azure. For the IT pros out there, right, that may be intimidated by DevOps and Azure Stack, right? What's the best way for them to ease their fears about DevOps or adopting the Azure Stack?
Well, it's hard. There are two kinds of IT pros. There are IT pros that want to automate. They want to be better. They want to do things. They realize that, hey, I'm doing this manual approach and this is just stupid. I want to be able to automate things. Those guys are the ones that will survive.
Yes.
The ones that sit down and says, well, I've been the SAN manager for 10, 25 years and I'm not going to change anything, they are going to vanish.
Yeah.
Vaporized. It's very simple. It's like, because you can't have it that way. And that's because the company says, well, we need to change. We need to have these following features, functions, whatever it is, and the time it takes to build a new environment is 6 months. We can't do that anymore. Let's go to Azure. And they go to Azure and they realize that there is no
magic bullet.
No, it's just you build everything. It's like, hey, it works. It's fast. It's simple, and the developers can do everything much faster than they could do before.
So like, okay, you have the SAN guy, right? He's been managing SANs for 10, 15 years,
Absolutely.
right? For something like Azure Stack and ARM, right? They may be looking at it and it's like, oh, that's a lot of PowerShell. There's JSON, right?
Yes.
I don't want to do code. but in Visual Studio, and that word can be intimidating, right?
IT pros just had
they just clam up when they hear Visual Studio.
Yeah.
But modifying ARM templates or working with ARM templates in Visual Studio really gives you that visual aspect and marries it with the code, right?
It's a new approach. I mean, if I have a conversation with someone that says, I do understand the side state configuration. Okay, so that's a declarative way to define something. If I show the same guy an ARM template in Visual Studio who goes like, I got it. It's the same thing. It's just different, right?
Yeah.
You got it. It's the old task sequence script batch file way
it really
compared to defining a state. And it's like, if you're telling a kid that is very small, you need to instruct them that move your feet, and then the other one, and then the other one. But if they are in the age of at least 15, you can say, can you go to the kitchen? Because I need to have this. You can even say, can you fetch me something? And they can figure out how to do that on their own. And that is a declarative way to say it. I want the state to be, I need whatever thing I need to have here, make it so. And you either get this or you don't.
Yeah, because this kind of goes back to is really how that IT pro works. Are you an organized person or are you an unorganized person where you're essentially you've just been asked to provide a set of servers for this new application that's coming in stream. And the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to spin up a set of servers without asking, are these in the DMZ? Do they need storage? How much memory they need? So I'm not planning, I'm just reacting. And in this declarative scenarios, we're actually going to essentially plan. We're going to actually make that little recipe to say that I need actually 3 machines. I want them on these networks with this memory. And I have a documented scenario to say this is exactly what I need and how it's going to be configured. And that's a major change for a lot of different houses of how they do things. But the DevOps approach also isn't just something the IT guy makes a decision on saying, okay, we're going to do DevOps. That has to come from the top down. This is definitely coming from the C levels where they've looked at this scenario of I'm deploying applications. The development teams have been doing agile development for numbers of months and years at this point. And of course, these builds then go through the QA process. And ultimately, after a number of weeks, they'll get deployed to IT, into the production systems, because we have a gating system.
So I think you bring up a good point, right? If you're an IT pro and you want to adopt Azure Stack, you want to adopt DevOps, right? You want to adopt a new way of thinking about things, but maybe your management is not on the same page. As an IT pro, what's the best way to convince them to adopt something like Azure Stack?
There's a great book, which was the Phoenix Project. I'm not sure how many people have actually read through this particular book, but it's a really good, fun read, but it's very real for some of the challenges that we run as essentially firefighters, IT people, and the boundaries that exist between, well, I suppose within IT itself, we've got the network guys, we've got the storage guys, and we've got us dealing with the servers. And then you've got them people back there that are writing the applications and harassing us to talk to the network guys and the storage guys to get everything set it up. And the Phoenix Project as a book really sets out the challenge of, we're getting deployments done once every 2 months. And then finally somebody walks in and says, I'd like to know that you can do 10 deployments a day. And everybody has a complete meltdown thinking, sorry, will you get real? Essentially, this is what DevOps is, and figuring out how you get from there to here is really what this is all about. And all that this is, containers or Azure Stack, it is a tool to deliver this. This is just a methodology and a process, and once we've embraced those, lives change. Yeah, of course, we're not going to lose our jobs. We're just going to do our jobs completely different and far more efficient, and you're going to look back in a year's time when you've made those changes and say, oh God, I wish I read the book a year ago.
But at the same time, I mean, take the SAN guy, right? He's been managing storage forever. He actually knows things. He could be one of those guys that really knows IOPS. He knows performance. He knows how to deal with storage. Well, that knowledge could then be used because someone needs to manage the fabric layer anyway.
Without a question.
Yeah, so the IT guy can either go to the DevOps track, building the infrastructure, well, or he could be the guy that actually does the Azure Stack maintenance, because it still requires hardware. It still requires storage. It's just the SAN is going to be storage spaces direct or anything like that, and that still needs to be calculated, maintained, monitored, and you need to change the hardware. You need to, and so that's going to be the fabric layer. The fabric admin is now going to be servicing the DevOps. So it's just that the middle layer of clicking people, that's gone.
Is that known as like a cloud administrator or a cloud architect?
Cloud engineer,
you know,
possibly.
those type of
yes,
roles.
Of course, but I think yes is probably the direct answer, that these guys are going to evolve into new roles to help to make sure that cloud is running very well.
Yep.
But the question really is, how deep in there will they really have to get? If it's a cloud, they shouldn't really be tweaking it. There'll be predefined expectations, performances and stuff like that. So tweaking at that level shouldn't really have to happen. But more importantly, you don't really want the guy that's really good at writing his Java or his C# code also being the guy that's deciding the security profile for the firewalls.
Great point.
You actually want that firewall and network guy to actually come over here and sit beside the developer, and when he's wrote that infrastructure as code, have a suggestion saying, actually, don't put this on one disk, let's put 5 disks in, because each one disk has a predefined set of IOPS, and if you put 5 in, then we can scale that and have 5 times more IOPS. So their job essentially is still extremely relevant because they have very strong domain knowledge for what they're doing. It's just a methodology of we're just working on a template now and we're pushing that out to deploy. So that they become part of that development cycle, and that's really what DevOps is about. It's not, we wrote the code, go do it. It's, hang on, let's work together and say, well, you know, why do these dev guys constantly come back and ask me to actually do this? It's silly. Now let's get back there to the start point, sit with them, talk to them about the project, understand the requirements, and help them architect it directly into the project and revision it as we need to.
Yeah, so the knowledge is still needed, it's just different.
Just how you implement it.
Yeah, it's different.
And you could take Azure Stack, right, and like ARM templates, and really build things in a test or a QA environment and kind of move them through stages, right? Because it's templatized at that point.
Absolutely.
And you can say, well, we don't want to use ARM templates, we want to use PowerShell. So yeah, you can do that too. Or you can combine them together. So there's so many different ways to deal with this. We're going to see people saying, you know, ARM template is the one and only. And then we're going to see people that says, no, I'm not using ARM templates at all. I'm going to build everything from using a PowerShell script. Okay, that's possible too. So even if you have the same platform, there are different ways to work with it. I think ARM template is going to be better for DevOps, but I think that plain vanilla PowerShell script to build things could be the IT Pro way of doing it.
Got it. That's interesting.
But since Azure Stack supports them both, and when it comes to the fabric layer of the Azure Stack, well, then you don't really have any ARM templates anyway, because it's going to be installing and PowerShelling and scripting. And right now, the proof of concept solution that we have, well, it's running a PowerShell script to build everything, which is pretty cool, actually. It's like fire it up and like, well, I have an Azure Stack, and an hour ago I didn't.
And I think that's something that's actually very relevant, because this essentially is an Azure Stack. It is a very complicated environment. And if we think about this like any application that we deliver to our organizations, they're quite complicated. Azure Stack, on the level of complications, it's very high. So taking a look at the fact that they have a single script that you hit go on, walk away and come back 5 hours later, and you have a fully deployed stack with all of the virtual machines, all of the software, and ultimately a web portal you just simply log into, that is the unicorn. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're doing this whole thing for.
So here's another question. Does VMM go away with Azure Stack? Is there still a need for VMM?
Yes. For companies that doesn't really embrace the idea of DevOps fully, but still wants to have the ability, they're going to most likely continue running the System Center Stack for a very long time. And in that case, Virtual Machine Manager is going to be the only sensible tool to deploy a nano server and storage spaces direct from a more traditional perspective. But they will be possible for them to use the Azure Pack instead. So that will give them not the same experience currently, but it's at least a self-service and infrastructure as services. And
definitely
like
a product that is still getting invested into as we move forward, embracing everything that's coming in 2016. So Virtual Machine Manager is still a live product. And
two tracks, the Azure Pack or the Azure Stack.
Yeah.
Nice. One more question, and this is, I think, a big question. Azure Stack and OpenStack.
Wow, okay, this is definitely a loaded one. And
I had to go there.
You certainly did. These are different beasts, very, very different beasts. And I would probably not even compare the two of them. I would probably compare OpenStack to Azure Pack far quicker.
So why wouldn't you compare Azure Stack and
Because
OpenStack?
if I think of the very first versions of Azure and Azure Pack, we did not have this templating engine for doing all the deployments, the ARM template, which essentially is what Azure 2.0 or Azure Stack is about. OpenStack, while is an enormous product and is getting an awful lot more platform services added to it, it really and truly doesn't have that same magic that essentially is the resource platform. So we are back to still delivering infrastructure as code without any question, but more on that, we'll write the shell scripts that we need to do these and make this thing happen. It is definitely prolific. It is definitely one of those solutions that is going to consistently stay around. We're going to see the big cloud providers support it. But if you have tried it and you have deployed it, then you're going to know what it feels like to support it.
So, but with OpenStack, if you have OpenStack and you have something like Amazon or Google, or I don't know if I should even say those words on this video, but does that really give you a true hybrid like Azure Stack is? An extended region of Azure, right?
No,
it's a region.
The closest to that is an announcement made by Google here very recently, where they are essentially going to consider OpenStack as their on-premise version of the Google Cloud. But
it's not true hybrid,
no,
right?
it is certainly not true hybrid, and this is a very step one scenario where Google have started delivering functions that now work in the OpenStack world. But if you consider what OpenStack and Google Cloud do versus what Azure Stack and Azure Stack and Azure, because they are the same ultimately, and it's all about consistency, then yes, it's somewhere they're probably going, and understand that this is a direction that makes a lot of sense, so that if people are deploying to OpenStack, that they can easily take that template, not that they have one yet, and deploy it to Google. Microsoft are definitely ahead of this particular race, there's no question.
So with Azure Stack, right, it's a true hybrid, right? It's another region in your data center, essentially.
It's Azure, right? It's just your own personal whatever of Azure. So
and no one else really has that out there, or is even really.
No, but to be fair as well, we have to acknowledge the fact that Azure Stack is a subset of Azure. So while we say that Azure Stack is Azure, we must acknowledge that Azure has 100+ different services and platforms. Azure Stack today is a proof of concept and really has only a tiny subset of those. And it will be over time you're going to see more of those getting deployed on premise, registered into that resource provider, and then letting it off.
But so everything will never be, I mean, there's no way, because some of the services that run in the Azure cloud today is based on big data, and they use the power of the entire Azure cloud, which you can never do unless in the future your local Azure stack is somehow connected into it, so then it becomes a part of it. If that would ever be possible, or a future plan, well, then you will be a part of Azure.
Well, with things like Express Route, right, or site-to-site VPNs, and maybe you run some workloads up in Azure, maybe you run workloads down in Azure Stack.
That's possible already. I think where Michael's really going to is that the concept of, I want to actually put out a Spark or something to that effect, then I deploy that to my Azure Stack, which makes a decision in the background saying, okay, I don't have those resource providers locally, I've got some data domain issues to deal with, so I'm going to actually push that out onto this particular Azure location that is going to ensure that my data domain isn't actually breached at this point. But that's completely transparent then at that point, because Azure Stack is making those decisions. I'm not making the decision to go directly to the cloud. So when I offer that service as a hoster or as an enterprise, my users that are subscribing to my Azure Stack don't really know where that final compute or that data is hosted.
That would be awesome. That would be like magic, right?
Really
that would just happen
really
in the background.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you just and then maybe you could saying, well, I have capacity. Maybe I can sell some of the capacity back. In theory,
yes.
that is how similar they are. Right, so that is in theory possible. If it's going to be practical, I have no idea. But if you compare other solutions like OpenStack and Google, well, they are just providing it's more of a, we would like to work with this.
It's consistent.
We would like this to work.
Story, yeah.
But Azure Stack is siblings in that way.
Yeah.
And that's why I agree with you saying OpenStack and Azure Pack. Well, that is something you can compare, because they are built basically the same way. Yeah. It's just a front end for something else. While Azure Stack is Azure in a local version.
Good question, yeah.
Awesome. So I think we're being flagged. Time's up. You didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, so
Tried to save the audience. An Irish twang in the background. I'm an MVP in Cloud and Data Center with background on Virtual Machine Manager and System Center suites. My name is Damian Flynn, and it's been a pleasure with Steve and Michael. Thank you.
thanks, Lee.
Thank you.